Recording in progress to hear this later. So, our trip discovering Arizona with Gulliford's Travels is coming up in January. Andy, whom you see here on the side, and I are going to be leading that tour. And we're going to do a deep dive into the tour tonight. So if you have any questions, go ahead and ask. You may ask by unmuting. You may also shoot it into the chat window and we'll respond as possible. So these are the dates, January 3 through 11. Our registration deadline is coming up soon, November 3rd. That's because the hotels have very far out cancellation deadlines. So we have to get on this soon. So we've got the double occupancy and the single occupancy listed there. You have the bulk of it is included, the coaches, transportation, guide interpretation, 8 nights lodging, all entries, 12 meals, a welcome dinner among them. And you have the option to have us get your flights for you. It is not in there, at least at the moment, but you do have the option for us to add that, or not add that, well, I guess, yes, add that in. We would just take care of those details for you. So you see the Arizona flag there, the Arizona flag and award winner. As you see from the picture, there is a great video about what makes a good flag. Arizona, it makes a good flag. It doesn't have any words on it. It's pretty unique. It's kind of fun. All right, next slide. So Andy and I are just going to walk through slide by slide, and we're going to add in some fun details. As I said, if you have any questions, just give a shout out. We're going to fly to Phoenix. That, of course, a direct flight from Denver. There's no way we're going to take a connecting flight. That would be just nuts. So we're going to head into Phoenix. It's January. There are multiple reasons to go to Arizona in January. And of course, the main reason is because January is when the people in Phoenix, I think, are the happiest to be in Phoenix. The weather there can be somewhat assaulting in the summertime. So the wintertime is when you go and have the fun of it. We'll get to Phoenix.
And I want to talk about, we had a really brutal winter in Durango last year, and it was tough. I mean, we had a lot of snow, and we love the water, we love the snow, but it was unrelenting. And so we live west of town in Durango. We live at 7,300 feet, and we had so much snow that in order to walk my dogs, we had to go to Utah. There was just too much snow. And we kept shoveling little pathways for the dogs, and they kept filling up with snow again. So, it's gorgeous right now. We're having a great, Indian summer, long fall. But I want folks listening tonight to think about how cold it gets in Denver, even though, we can have warm spots in January. But that's partly why we planned this trip in January to Arizona. It's prime time there for weather, and there's so many sights to see. Kevin's done a great job of lining up museums. We're really going to tour the state from the south to the north. And so we'd start with the state capitol, our welcome dinner. So I'm really impressed with the logistics of this trip. And certainly we'll cover a whole lot of history from one end of the state to the other. Plus, we're going to look at stars. And as we go through this program, which Michael did a really good job of putting together, if you've got any questions, just pop out with the question. But it's really going to be a fun trip with, Coloradoans visiting Arizona.
It's true. And we haven't done a full Arizona tour yet. Starting in 2013, I began leading tours to all of our neighbors, and we've done all of our neighbors as solo states. We focused on just that state. We have never yet focused just on Arizona. We've gone in a little bit, but not just an Arizona tour. So this will be our first one of these. I have been to every single state capitol building in the country, and that's 50. I've even been to one territorial one. I have 4 more to go. The Arizona State Capitol that you see right there, it is not the largest. It is not the most impressive, but it does have one thing that no other capital has. anywhere in the country. If you look, you have that central statue at the top. That central statue is actually independently mobile thing. So as the wind blows, it will turn and look in different directions. A tiny detail, and one you'd easily miss if you didn't just sort of sit there and stare at it. But the folks in Phoenix were kind of happy to share that little detail. So we'll get to see something unique there with the Capitol building.
And part of this tour will not only be history, but prehistory. So we can't visit Phoenix without talking about the Hohokam, the Native Americans who were there. And in fact, when Phoenix is a territory for a long time, it doesn't become a state. Arizona doesn't become a state until 1912. There are actually 1,000-year-old Hohokam canals, which wind up being reused. So we'll talk about the prehistory and the history of Arizona.
We will definitely get more than one may easily digest, but we'll make it in digestible portions. All right, Michael, next slide, please. All right, so we stay overnight in Phoenix, and then we drive to Tucson. Essentially, we're making a big counterclockwise rectangle around the state. So we're going to go to one of the museums there. When we went to Mexico earlier, was that this year? It was this year, yes. When we went to Mexico in June, we traveled in the Sonoran Desert there, where the Colorado River comes down into Mexico with the Sonoran Institute. And so this is part of that same organization. So we're going to be touring their local history and also learning about all of their programs for preserving as much of the natural environment of the Southwest as possible. Tucson is one of those cities that I think people don't realize is so intriguing until they get there. A lot of folks go, wow, this is super different from Phoenix, even though it's only an hour and a half away. It just has a very different feel, very eclectic, artsy, very likable. So we're going to do both a bus and walking tour of the city, since there's really so much to see. We've got folks on tap in town. Yep, there it is, the Arizona Historical Society, to help us with both pieces. So we're going to get the whole lay of the land in the city of Tucson and stay overnight there as well. So I've been to Tucson, but there's more to see.
Yeah, well, one of the things I'll be talking about are public lands in Arizona. Obviously, it's the Grand Canyon state, but there are some very interesting Bureau of Land Management lands that we're going to come close to and actually will visit when we get south of Tucson to Sierra Vista. And I'm working on a new book, and the new book is about the Bureau of Land Management, the National Conservation Lands. And one of the really just excellent interviews I was able to do was with former Secretary of the Interior and former Governor of Arizona, Bruce Babbitt. And one of the things Arizona did is it took a lot of state land and blocked it up and traded it for federal land. And so there are some really interesting places that are national monuments and national conservation areas in Arizona. And it's because they were able to swap out state land for federal land. And Secretary Babbitt explained to me just politically how difficult that would be to do today, but they were able to do it in the 1980s, in the 1990s, and it's really changed the map of Arizona. So for instance, in Tucson, there are, other national monuments really close, and then north of Phoenix. So we will see a lot of these either in person or out the window with the bus.
All right. A lot of that's news to me, so I'm going to learn a lot on this tour as well. That sounds awesome. Some of the sites that we're going to see, you have the built environment that we're going to get to tour, and you're going to get to see some of the natural environment. So some pictures of things yet awaiting us there. And Michael put in the route for us. It's funny, I didn't realize it was southeast. Somehow in my head, I had that it was due south from Phoenix to Tucson, but I guess that's part of the fun. So we'll take the drive along the interstate. I do want to let you know we will not be visiting the metric highway on this tour. I thought about putting it in there, but it just doesn't work. There's a highway, there's an interstate in Arizona that uses the metric system. It was the only one successfully implemented in the country, and they've kept it that way. All righty, next slide. Off to January 5th, our next day. So we visit the actual historical society. So this would be the equivalent of any state's historical society. So this is a great place to go. You learn all the local history from the source. So this will be the complement to what Andy is going to be telling you. Since we are going down in the winter, we wanted to get out for part of 2 days to see some of the natural environment, not simply to do the human-built environment. We also wanted to see part of the natural world. Andy has a colleague in this part of the world who's going to be getting us out to see that natural environment and tell us all about the birds. So we are going to head over to Sierra Vista. I think we're there 2 nights because that will be our base of operations for seeing some of the wonderful things in the immediate area. A lot of birds either overwinter in this part of the world, or they make a slow progress up as spring approaches, and some of them might even be there by that time.
So let me talk a little about this map. The blue line is somewhat deceiving because Tucson is obviously a whole lot bigger than these other little communities. But Patagonia, Arizona, not Patagonia, the country, Sonoita, and then if you look on the map, you'll see Las Ciénegas, NCA, and then Sierra Vista. And the image is of a gray hawk. And there are actually parrots in southeast Arizona, southern Arizona. And so this is one of those amazing BLM swaps where the Bureau of Land Management didn't own an acre along the San Pedro River, but managed to do some trade. And so one of the things I've learned from my new book is that because so much of Bureau of Land Management land is canyon and desert and mesas in the Southwest, the actual towns, Phoenix, Cedar City, Utah, other places, Tucson, were boxed in by public land. And so you could swap out federal land, have developers turn it into, houses and subdivisions, but you could trade for really important conservation areas. And that's what that gray hawk represents. And so, yes, as Kevin said, we're going to see some pretty interesting natural areas, and one of them will be riparian corridors. And so there are birds that come into Las Ciénegas and birds that come into the Sierra Vista area.
I'm looking forward to it. All right, next slide. All right, so as I was looking through the numerous offerings in this part of the world, as you may imagine, there were simply too many things to do, but I did decide to jazz things up with some fun offerings in the area. The Military Intelligence Soldier Heritage Learning Center is a museum that focuses on the history of the intelligence gathering agencies for the federal government and their work around the world to make sure that everything is as A-OK as possible. I have never been there, but the website, the description, and the tours all sound really neat. And so while we're there, we might as well learn about something we don't deal with day to day. And I hope none of you have been there because it's going to be a really sweet visit. We have our second day based out of Sierra Vista. From here, we're going over to another area along the San Pedro River for a few more bird opportunities to see some beautiful countryside and enjoy the milder temperatures of January in Arizona. So you see one of the signs there on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side, one of the tweets. I only know maybe 4 or 5 birds, and that's not one of the ones I know. Andy, do you know what it is?
I do, but I can't think of it right now. I think it's the vermilion flycatcher.
It kind of looks like it.
Which is an endangered species. And in the winter, the leaves will be off, so it should be easier to see these, and they are a bright, bright red. But I wanted to also comment on the Military Heritage Center. The fort, and so it's Fort Huachuca at Sierra Vista, Arizona. And that fort was a Black Buffalo Soldier fort. And it is to this day the place where American soldiers in the United States Army go for intelligence training. So yes, it's history, but it's very current. And so, you know, the latest in computers and drones and all those things take place here in training at Fort Huachuca, including, and Michael's here somewhere, Michael will remember this, when we did the Colorado River tour, we saw this giant blimp in the air, and that blimp is monitoring the border with Arizona and Mexico. That blimp rises up out of Fort Huachuca. So yeah, the military heritage and sort of surveillance is pretty important. And then we'll come back down to earth with the birds.
I love it. Sounds fun to me. All right. Now, whenever you go to the southern part of a state and there are things on the other side, well, you just have to drive. So this is our driving day, but it is not a terrible driving day. We are going to be driving through some incredibly beautiful countryside. So if you look at that strip of green from the upper left-hand to the lower, or the middle right-hand side, we're going to be driving through some beautiful canyon lands, some beautiful national forests. I think that's the Sitgreaves National Forests in there, and it's breathtaking. We're not taking the interstate. We could, but we're not going to do it. We're going to take a little bit of a longer ride to get up to the wonderful city of Winslow, where we're going to stay at La Posada. So the drive itself will be a win, but the real reason we have to go is I absolutely insist that we stay at La Posada. I don't know if any of you were on our Harvey House tour back, I think it was 2018. This will be your opportunity to learn all about the legacy of Fred Harvey and all the Harvey houses in the West. We have a lot to say, and they had a really profound impact on many things. And we are going to stay at one of those there in Winslow for 2 nights.
So yes, yeah, Michael, thanks for advancing that. Let me explain the images here. That is a statue of Jackson Browne when he was in the Eagles band, and his famous song, you know, about being in Winslow, standing in the corner in Winslow, Arizona, and waiting for a ride, and, you know, girl in a flatbed Ford. And Michael has commented on that truck. That's a lot bigger than I'm just thinking about a pickup with a flatbed. That's a huge state bed truck. It's a fun song, and La Posada is an extraordinary place. The food is magnificent. The rooms are themed. I think a couple of nights, my wife and I went down there. We were going to stay 1 night. We couldn't. We stayed 2 nights, and it was just great. So La Posada is one of the last big railroad hotels built by Mary Jane Coulter for the Harvey Company, for the Santa Fe Railroad, and it is magnificently restored. It's 75,000 square feet. It is just an incredible place. Anybody going from Tucson up to Santa Fe for the opera, here's where they stay. And so it is a joy, and I'm really excited that Kevin managed to get us lodging there. It's really going to be a highlight of the trip.
Yes, we got this first. We made certain that we had this. No way I was going to gamble. And Andy, is that your colleague there, the birder?
No, the guy standing up there. So when I was at La Posada, I researched it, wrote about it to the Durango Herald. And one of the things the owners are doing is trying to replicate exactly how it was in the 1920s and 1930s. And so this is a little well and a water feature that Mary Jane Coulter had put in, and now they're restoring. And so that's part of it, is, you know, the ongoing restoration. So hopefully we'll get a full tour, historic tour of the facility, which includes not only the hotel, but the grounds. And then, of course, the train is right there. So the train doesn't stop there anymore, but it's on the tracks. And it's just a beautiful, beautiful place. But I want to get our guests excited about the fact that this was a total restoration. when the railroad sold this off, the accountants had gotten the wrong data. And so they had zeroed out the hotel. So the couple that bought it as if it were 7 acres with no building on it. And somehow the accountant subtracted 75,000 square feet of building. So it had some asbestos ceilings, it had some things wrong with it. But the original furnishings were exquisite, and they included big leather chairs. Some of those chairs are back. So what I want everybody to know who comes on this tour are the jackrabbit ashtrays. So Mary Coulter designed an ashtray that matched these really comfy leather chairs, so you could put your cigarettes and cigars in it and so forth. And the feet of the jackrabbit hold the bowl of the ashtray, and then it had ears that stuck straight up. The last time one of those ashtrays was found in Santa Fe, it sold for $5,000.
Wow.
They're that rare. So they were one of a kind, built just for La Posada. So there'll be other little details like that. The stained glass is extraordinary. Look here on the left, you've got, you know, so you've got, in a way, it's Mary Coulter. And if you look at what she's holding, yes, she's got her, you know, level, her T-square as an architect, but she's also got a tower. So she was so impressed by the towers of Mesa Verde that she built one at the Grand Canyon. And so that's part of the inspiration for the glass. And then, of course, the two guys there are holding aprons which were worn by the Hardy Boys. And the other thing about Winslow that I'll talk about are the tours that launched from Winslow and then would bring you back to Santa Fe. And those are pretty exciting. Those were in great big Packard automobiles, and quite a story there.
I love it. It's going to be exciting. My first time to get to stay there, not just visit. All right, next slide. Now, not everything is about what humans have created. Sometimes it's nice to see the natural world, even it's in its destruction. I've always wanted to go here. This will be my first time getting to go here and have just the full fun of it. I'm going to go to Meteor Crater Natural Landmark. We're going to head over to Flagstaff for lunch, which is nearby, and then we're going to visit the Lowell Observatory. This is the fourth piece of our Dark Skies progress. So we've been doing a dark sky program each year since the pandemic let us come back. So now we've seen the 3 seasons, spring, summer, and autumn, but now we need to do winter. So we're going to where I thought we'd have the best chance in the United States of having good weather in the winter, or at least somewhat less odious temperatures. And we're going to the Fort Lowell Observatory because that is where the entire program of Dark Skies International began back in the 60s. So we're going to learn all about that as part of the tour. I know some of you have already heard me present on this previously, so we'll revisit that. So we'll cover the whole program again, and we will literally be where it all started as an international movement. So we're going to do 2 programs at the Fort Lowell Observatory in the afternoon, and that evening, we will go out to see the stars. We're not seeing them at the Fort Lowell Observatory. I decided instead to do a program a little farther out in a more natural environment. Not that the Lowell Observatory wouldn't have been great, but I like this other one. So we're going to do both samples so that you get the taste. We are going to be much closer to the Grand Canyon, but don't worry. When we're out stargazing, you won't be right by the edge or anything like that. So this is your chance to get astronomical there in the Flagstaff area.
And once you sign up for the tour, one of the books I'd recommend that is really a top-notch book by a friend of mine, a fellow I've done some meetings with. The title of the book is The End of Night, and it is the best single dark skies book. He talks about lighting in Paris and New York City and, you know, glare. He debunks the myth that you need all these security lights to keep burglars away, because he says and you have too many lights, it creates too many shadows, and you get higher crime. So really interesting book. And of course, he goes to the west and the southwest. So the End of Night would be a great book to start reading before our tour.
I love it. All right, next slide. So as with all things, you used to have to make your circle back toward home. This day is another bit of a travel day. There will be some beautiful views in it. We're not going to take the interstate the whole way. We're going to take some of the interior roads. We're going to end up back in Phoenix, just covering some distance. We do give you, I believe this is the day where we have, yes, you have the morning to enjoy La Posada. We don't actually do anything until noon. So you're going to have the morning to sleep in. You're going to have the morning to look around anything you've not gotten to see. This is your morning of relaxation. We don't even have our first thing until lunch at noon. And then we head to Phoenix. So we don't want to have too much of an aggressive day before we continue back toward our starting location. Once there, Andy actually recommended the first museum there. I've not been to it at all. And the other one, I don't know, maybe Andy recommended that one as well. I think it was, yes. And go ahead.
Yeah, the Herd Museum is one of the top museums in the nation, actually in the world, with Native American collections.
That was it.
And those of you who remember Senator Barry Goldwater, he donated a magnificent Kachina collection. And so there's all sorts of things here. There'll be plenty of books in the bookstore. The Herd Museum has done its own exhibit on the Harvey House girls. So yeah, this is one of the top museums really in the American West for Native American materials. And I'm really looking forward to it. The Musical Instrument Museum, there you go. I want to pluck some of those guitar strings right there. What an interesting thing. And you look in the far left of that slide, maybe that's a drum. I don't know what that is, but that'll be fun. And in the Herd Museum, I'll be able to talk about, you know, Hopi culture, Navajo culture, all sorts of things as we visit the collection.
Yes, Michael, my colleague, did the research trip on this one to lay out all the logistics. And Andy made the suggestions. Michael did the logistics. So he has a large packet of go here, go there for me. These two museums are going to be new to me. I've been to some of the other places, but not these two. So I'm excited. I'll get to have the fun of them myself. We have our farewell dinner. I don't know how it happens, but it always happens that a week just goes and a week will have vanished. It happens every time that way. And then the next day, we're heading home. And you will have started your year with quite a cross-section of things to see all in one little old state, from the natural to the astronomical to the historic to the cultural, with food and everything along the way. And Andy's going to pepper you with all kinds of information. I'll do the same. And on the flight home, you get to digest it all.
So I'd like to open it up to questions. If Kevin would sort of MC those, and let's see what kind of questions or suggestions folks have.
Absolutely. So folks, you may either unmute or write any questions you have into the chat window. We'll get you set up with an answer. If you know anyone you'd like to come along with us or know about this tour, let us know. We'll happily send them any information necessary. That's my clock saying it's 6:30. All right, any questions out there?
This is Gail. I live down there in Sierra Vista in the wintertime. And if you're going to Fort Huachuca, in addition to the Intelligence Museum, it might be well to consider the Buffalo Soldier Museum there, which is on the parade grounds in the old fort area, and also the Drone Museum, which is across the street from it.
Gail, thanks a lot. I had no idea you're saying there's 3 separate museums at Fort Huachuca.
That is correct. The newest one is the one that you're planning on visiting, and it is excellent. But the other 2 are also excellent. And if you're there, they're certainly worth taking the time to see.
And are they walking distance or do we get back in the bus?
You need to drive to those they
Okay.
moved the Intelligence Museum from where it was, so it is closer to the entrance to the fort than it used to be. So you do need to drive to them. Definitely worth seeing. And that's where all of the old housing is, all of the beautiful old officer houses that are around the parade grounds. All of that is there. There's also a little drive at the end of that parade ground that goes up on the hill that overlooks the entire valley and gives you an idea why it is they placed Fort Huachuca there.
And give us a heads up, how many soldiers are stationed there now annually?
You know, it used to be around 7,000. I don't think it's that high now, but they are heavily, heavily into the intelligence. One of the other things that is there is the only surviving Black Officers Club in the United States.
Huh.
And it came into existence toward the end of the war when the segregation of the military ended. It was a place where they trained thousands of Black nurses during World War II. And it's pretty interesting. It is not something that is open to visit, but getting the information about it is definitely worthwhile.
Right. And then,
You can drive past it, you can see it.
Yeah. And the Black Buffalo history is pretty important too.
It is very important, and that is a very good museum.
I've added it to my list. Not certain we'll get to go. As always, there's too much to see, but I've written it down and I'll see if we may find a spot for that. Thank you. Any questions? Just yodel if you do.
Yeah, hi Kevin, hi Andy. How many people do you need in order to take the trip? And when's the last time people can register? Or when do you have to know to cancel?
Hi Kate, hi OJ. So
Hi.
the November 3rd is the deadline. We have not had great signups for this one. We need 11 more people to reach our minimum. So not a strong showing on the numbers, unfortunately, but we're hoping that these last few weeks with a little jump starting, we can get those final folks. But November 3rd is the deadline.
Great, we'll keep our fingers crossed.
Whoop, 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 whoop.
And I was hoping that to help, encourage the group that Michael would show up with one of those little snow bowls and shake it so that you'd remember snow in Denver in January and want to come to Arizona.
I don't know if Michael has a snow globe, but it's a nice thought.
And could you put that book in the chat, Andy? The book and the author?
Yeah, Kevin can do that.
Yep. The End of Night.
The End of Night. Really an excellent book.
What's the author's name?
I don't have it right here, but it'll pop up.
All right, Michael might be able to Google that. He's incognito behind the scenes here, so we'll see if he can find that. My laptop's having mental issues, so I'm not going to do anything with it lest I make it blow up. I have to send it into the shop next week.
And so, if the trip makes, I will certainly be working on a bibliography of book list for folks coming.
All right, there you go, Paul
Paul
Bogard.
All right.
This
All
is
right,
Gail
folks.
again, and I'm going to tell you about one more thing when you're visiting for birds at the San Pedro River. You may have good birding there, you may not. It just kind of depends on the weather, but consider whitewater draw. Whitewater draw is where all of the whooping cranes come to, or the whooping cranes, sandhill cranes is what I'm trying to say, come to winter. And sometimes there's 50,000 there, but it is also a good birding spot because it has water. And that is a really good thing to consider. If you're not getting good birding at the San Pedro right at the river, Whitewater Draw is to the east of there, not all that terribly far.
Well, Gail, if the trip works, we'll put you and Marlo on the bus and you can help the driver. How's that?
Sure.
All right, I've added it to my notes. All right, so folks, we're going to conclude this. My colleague Michael's probably going to end up sending these out just as a general blast to folks. But for now, thank you for joining tonight. I hope you are having a lovely autumn evening. and we'll see you in Arizona soon. It's going to be here, boom, just like that. So again, thanks for joining. And Andy, thank you for coming along
Sure.
and helping with the delivery. Yeah, and more very soon. Good
All
night.
right. Take care, everybody.